Well, it is approximately 6:30, so I'd like to call to order the 18th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52, and if Kathy could lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first order of business will be to act on the minutes of the 17th regular meeting, May 5th. Any errors or omissions on that one? Seeing none, we'll accept that one by general consent. The other set of minutes would be for the district budget meeting of May 5th as well. Any errors or omissions on that one? We'll do the same. Brings us to communications. Kim.
I'd like to report the following resignations. Kayla Marston, Turner Elementary School Counselor, effective the end of this school year. Scott Sibley, Tripp Middle School 7th grade boys soccer coach, 7th grade boys basketball coach, and 7th grade baseball coach, effective also at the end of this year. Benjamin Redstone, boys freshman basketball coach, effective on May 6th. Tony Levitt, Tripp Middle School 8th grade girls basketball coach, effective at the end of this school year. Jeff Marquis, Tripp Middle School 8th grade girls soccer coach, effective at the end of this year. Dan Mellon, Tripp Middle School 7th and 8th grade boys baseball coach, effective at the end of this year. Alicia Sorois, Levitt Area High School English teacher, effective at the end of this year, but as you may remember, that's because she is taking the position of instructional coach at that school. Megan Chandra, Tripp Middle School Foreign Language teacher, effective the end of this school year. Bree Allard, Tripp Middle School Drama Director, effective June 15. Caitlin Saris, Levitt Area High School English teacher, effective June 16. And my understanding, Evan, she is moving out of state. Yes. And Caitlin Saris also as the Levitt Area High School Student Council Advisor, effective June 16.
Thank you. Brings us to adjustments to the agenda. Do we have adjustments? We do not have any further adjustments to the agenda. So that brings us to committee reports. Finance, Yuri.
We met this evening. We reviewed the February, March, and April financials. Through April, we're right on track. We should be right about 68% of our total budget. We also had a brief conversation of a couple of the lines that we had brought up before. One of which was transportation, where we were anticipating we would overrun that category. As everybody knows, gas cost continues to rise, so that line is going up. The good side of that is we've been able to keep our vehicle maintenance and our parts in check a little bit, so that's helping to offset some of that. And the other thing of note that we discussed was we have slated for 3 buses in the next approximately 8 or 10 months that are new to come. We're going to hold on to one of our existing buses. With the supply chain issues and with cost increases, we want to make sure we have enough buses on hand, so we're not going to get rid of all of them. And that was basically the brunt of what we talked about. We also signed payroll warrants and accounts payable.
Thank you. That brings us to PTB, which actually should be Jessica, but that committee has not met at this point. I think Dean's had some updates on the wastewater treatment plant process, and I'm sure he'll share those with us as they go. And the process seems to be showing a few more signs of life than it may have a month ago, which is encouraging. Curriculum policy, Joanne is not here this evening. Teresa, is that?
That's me. I can. Thank you. The committee met on May 10th and had a presentation from the Computer Science Committee members, and that work will be presented at a future board meeting. We reviewed policies BE, school board meetings, BEDH, public participation at board meetings, IGA curriculum development, IKA grading assessment systems, IKAB the reporting of student proficiency, and then JLCDA and the accompanying permission form for medical marijuana in schools. We have not presented any of those to the full board yet because Kim and I need to review the committee's decisions, but we will probably have those on in June.
Thank you. That brings us to student representatives report. Tristan, we can send a microphone down your way.
Prom will be on Saturday this week from about 7 p.m. to 10:30 in the Royal Oak Room in Lewiston, I believe. Ticket sales have concluded, well, just about concluded, and figures indicate a decent turnout for the event. This week, the 11th graders took the NWAs and the Science Aptitude Test. Lastly, the Unified Schools Club today worked to promote their program to 6th graders in the districts. That just about concludes my last student representative report.
Thanks, Tristan, and I'm pretty sure I just understood you to say your last student representatives report. So thank you for your participation in the process. I know we all enjoy hearing directly from students as to what's going on in the schools, and certainly wish you the best when you're not spending your Thursday evenings with us here. I'm sure you'll miss it terribly. Thanks again. That brings us to administrator reports, building principals. Do we have a game of rock, paper, scissors over there as to who's going first?
Good evening. All of you in front of you should have a handy handout that has some graphs on it. As you were informed, each of the schools administered a school climate survey to its students, to its staff, and to the community. And due to the age of the Turner Primary School students, we did not survey the students. However, the two graphs represent the data results from the community and from the staff. And you can see that the questions, like were addressed earlier, that a score ranges from a 1 to a 4, and the goal is the higher the better. And so some of the scores that are lower are some of the areas on the back that I have included that represent areas for growth and next steps. So overall, you can see the Family School Climate Survey results. So the way the survey is put together is there's a series of questions and they get clumped together to create a cluster. So there's 5 or 6 questions on each of those 5 topics: teaching and learning, school safety, interpersonal relationships, institutional environment, and parental involvement. And so if you look at the back, 2 of the strengths, and I tended to pick the highest scores and the lowest scores, but obviously as a school we're going to look at all of the data to make improvements. But like question number 1, I feel comfortable talking to my teachers at my students' school. That was a score of a 3.69, and you can see that goes under the teaching and learning graph. So that's just one of those 5 or 6 questions. And then question number 5, which relates to school safety, is my students feel safe at school and going to and from school. Both of those scores were a 3.68. And they're actually 2 separate questions, but I put them together, especially because of the rationale for the reason behind the survey was around assessing how our students are feeling about school and if they're feeling safe. And so you can see that that score was a 3.68, which was our highest score, and that's from the families, and that's related to feeling safe at school and going to and from school. For the staff portion, which is the lower graph, once again, the higher the score, the better. And I think, I don't have national averages, but I guess I was kind of looking at a 3 as kind of my baseline data, but I don't have the national average scores on the survey results to be able to compare. So you can see for areas of growth, which really relates to parental engagement and involvement, Question 20, I'm actively involved in activities at my student school. That was a 2.84. And then I frequently volunteer to help on special projects at my student school. That was a 2.31. And so you can see that those questions go directly under parental involvement, which was our lowest score on the family piece. I will share that we do have a field day coming up, and we have had 55 parents sign up to volunteer. We also had a book fair, and we had many, many parents volunteer. So people are really excited to come back into the school, and we're really excited about providing opportunities to do so. I know TES is going to come up here, but they had a great event today as well. So that's going to go along with the next steps at the bottom about re-engaging our community and connecting with our school. And then for the staff portion for areas of growth, you can see under physical environment, question number 17, my school building is well maintained. That was a score of a 2.29. And at this school, parents frequently volunteer, which kind of goes along with the parental piece, and that was a 2.33. So at the bottom, you can see the next steps that we're going to continue moving forward along include sharing the results with our leadership teams and our staff, to continue to work with those teams on providing opportunities to celebrate student success, and to continue to work with those teams to provide opportunities to re-engage our parents and our community. And then having the teams work together to address areas for improvement identified in the surveys. To continue to work with the facilities department on maintaining and upkeeping our building. We're working on some of those areas as well. And then, of course, the goal is to continue to administer this survey in the fall and spring of next year, to continue to monitor and adjust for areas of growth as needed. Does anyone have any questions about the family and staff climate surveys from TPS?
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I shared out at our last board meeting, I had shared, and I didn't put it on my form, but I just looked it up quickly, the national average for responses on the elementary survey. And this is actually, I believe, for the, I think it's all three of them. No, it can't be all three of them together. Anyway, it's 3.12. Now, the middle school and high school, when they report out, they took the extended version of the survey, and because that's a newer survey that has not been fully normed yet, there have not been enough participants. So they're at the average that I shared with you last time of 2.92 is actually for the short version, which the administrators of those schools felt they wanted to go with a more extended version. So I did not prepare a chart, but I wanted to reply, to share out what the surveys at Turner Elementary School yielded initially. For students, we had 244 respondents, and the average score was 2.93. And like Ryan, I picked out a few areas that were highlights in terms of a higher score, and then a few that are definitely areas that will be addressed by the staff at Turner Elementary School. I also looked particularly for questions that had to do with student safety and their feelings of connectedness to school, because you have heard people speak to concerns around bullying and students not feeling safe. So my school wants me to do well was a 3.69. My school has clear rules for behavior, 3.5. I feel safe at school, 2.96. And then there is an adult at school who will help me if I need it, is a 3.29. That to me was really important because we know that relationships are so critical, and I found that to be encouraging, that students do feel like there is someone that will help them if they need it. Students treat each other well, 2.39, and students in my class behave so that teachers can teach is a 2.33. Those are definitely areas that we have already started to work on and that will be continued into next year and beyond. And I'll get more specific into that at the end. So families, we had 62 respondents. The average score was 2.77. Teachers at my school, at my student's school, have high standards for achievement, was a 2.84, and teachers promote academic success for all was a 2.94. And again, I went to look for student safety. My student feels safe at school was a 2.66. Rules are consistently enforced, 2.16. So that is an area that we definitely have already started to address and will need to continue to address. 32 staff responded for an average score of 3.08. And in this, I picked out these two particular questions. Teachers work hard to make sure students do well, 3.62. And then if I report an unsafe or dangerous behavior, I can be sure the problem will be taken care of, was a 2.91. I feel that that's too low. I think if an unsafe or dangerous behavior is reported, it should be taken care of, and it should be addressed immediately. So that is an area that I'm going to share now, some of the things that we have put into place. So when I first transitioned to Turner Elementary School, probably even before I was named interim, when I was over supporting, I met with all grade levels to discuss the problem of bullying. I wanted to put it right out there to the students that I knew that they were concerned and that their parents were concerned. And so we really talked, and their teachers supported that with me, so I met by grade levels. I've worked to be visible in the school during arrival and dismissal, learning student names, listening to students as they share their concerns and issues. It's also really important that students know that they have an adult that they can trust, and I wanted them to know that in addition to their teacher, they could trust me. We identified the playground as an area of high number of behavioral incidents, and we restructured recess. That was an idea that came from the staff leadership team. By reducing the number of students on the playground at one time, and increasing the number of staff supervising. Each classroom teacher now goes out with their class. So our classroom teachers have 5 duties a week, and that is an outside duty. The teachers felt like they were losing instructional time by dealing with issues that were happening on the playground, and they have reported that that has really dissipated because they are able to handle the issues that happen on the playground when they are happening. Next steps, actually you're getting these results probably before all the staff have seen them. That's not typically how we would do things, but it was important that we get our results to you. We also, the 3 elementary principals, wait, are there 3 or 4 of us? The 4 elementary principals this afternoon were looking, and we pulled out the survey from 2 years ago, the fall before COVID, and we were starting to already do some comparisons. I know that work will happen over the summer with school leadership teams. We also want to include our PBIS teams, or our multi-tiered systems of support teams, to work together so they can address specific areas in the school where problems have been identified. Continue to provide lessons to students around safe use of technology and pro-social behaviors. I may have mentioned I've reached out to the Androscoggin Sheriff's Department and have someone who is hopefully going to be able to present to us, if not this spring, then fall, and really talk to the older students about the impact that technology, and particularly bullying on technology, either through Xbox, through their phones, through the apps they have on their phones, the impact that can have, and it does carry over into school. Increase partnerships with parents and guardians to support student growth. We had a tremendous turnout today, so much so that we had some traffic issues. We invited staff. Staff had worked really hard with students for Book One School. We had an author there. Darling's Ice Cream for a Cause was there. We raised some money for Camp Sunshine. It was just a really, from my perspective, really joyous day, and no one seemed that grumpy. And Principal Mates, thank you. I'm sorry for the dismissal issues that we caused, but she told me, go enjoy all those people in your school. Don't worry about it. We've got this. And then administer the survey. Like Ryan said, we need to administer the survey again in the fall and the spring of next year to monitor the progress. So I don't know if anyone has any questions for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Not surprisingly, we also administered surveys at Central School. 3 of them, of course, to students, families, and staff. And I did take a look at the way that most of the questions were worded. So with the students, it was never, sometimes, often, or always. So on a scale of 1 to 4, and obviously the higher the score, the better. We had 170 respondents, students grades 3 through 6. Our average score overall for the students was 3.15. Some little highlights and a couple of aha moments. My school wants me to do well. Teresa, I guess I took this right out of your playbook because I'm sitting there going, yeah. My school wants me to do well. We scored a 3.8. My school has clear rules for behavior, 3.68. I feel safe at school, 3.29. And there is an adult at school who will help me if I need it, 3.64. We do know relationships mean everything. Other points to look at, students treat each other well was a 2.71. And students in my class behave so that teachers can teach, it was a 2.58. So there's some room for improvement in those particular areas. With our families, there were 49 respondents, and the family reports were broken out into a number of categories. Our average score for families was 3.09. And as far as initial category, teaching and learning overall was a 3.13. Within that category, teachers at my student school have high standards for achievement was a 3.08. Teachers at my student school promote academic success for all students was a 3.12. And teachers at my student school work hard to make sure students do well was a 3.18. Around, still with the parent survey, school safety was a 3.07. Underneath that, my student feels safe at school was a 3.22. My student school sets clear rules for behavior was a 3.06. A couple of areas that we're looking at, school rules are consistently enforced at my student school was perceived at a 2.78. And school rules and procedures at my student school are fair was a 2.82. Again, under the parent survey, interpersonal relationships overall was a score of a 3.1. Underneath that, my student feels successful at school, 3.14. My student is frequently recognized for good behavior, 3.16. Teachers at my school treat all students with respect, 3.12. And I feel comfortable talking with my student's teacher was a 3.39. A couple of areas, again, that we're looking at. All students are treated fairly at my student school was a 2.88. Staff at my student school communicate well with parents, 2.92. And not surprisingly, under parental involvement, parent-teacher conference attendance, parents rated themselves at a 3.53. We love to see that, the higher the better. And being actively involved in school at this time, 2.84. And volunteering to help on special projects was a 2.22. Around staff, we had 29 respondents with an average score of 3.11. Again, structure for learning, the staff scored at a 3.35. Underneath that, teachers work hard to make sure students do well and have high standards for achievement. Both of those areas scored at a 3.41. Feeling school safety overall was a 3.17. And underneath that, I feel safe at school scored at a 3.34. And if I report unsafe or dangerous behaviors, I can be sure the problem will be taken care of was a 2.38. So we'll be certainly looking at that area. Around peer and adult relationships, the overall score there was a 2.97. Under that category, students at my school treat each other fairly regardless of race, ethnicity, or culture was a 3.52. Students at my school show respect to other students regardless of academic ability was a 3.07. A couple of areas we'll be looking at. Students at my school treat each other with respect, 2.79. And they demonstrate behavior that allows teachers to teach and students to learn, where it was scored at a 2.48. So we do have a few takeaways here. Students' perception of instructional expectations, safety, and adult connectedness are pretty solid, though we can always do better. We found noted alignment of perception of feeling safe at school among students at a 3.29, parents at a 3.22, and staff at a 3.34. So that was encouraging, but again, we're always shooting for 4. We did reiterate the bullying policies and procedures with our staff. We follow up on every concern to determine if it's bullying, and regardless of whether the situation is bullying or not, we follow through on the concerns to get a resolution among students. We do pride ourselves, the administration and the staff, on being throughout the building, and we work really hard to connect with all of our students and staff in our classrooms. and particularly with the administration, hallways during lunch, recess duties, et cetera. We like to lend support as much as we can through that presence, and that's when your established relationships with students really pay off. Admin continues to work on our building leadership team and our PBIS University, working with them. We're going to use the data to identify areas of concern for student behaviors. We did use results of a different survey earlier in the year to do just that. So prior to this survey, we had committees note that playground was an area of concern, primarily due to unstructured time. And if we had a higher rate than normal or than expected of behavioral incidents. So the teams asked classroom teachers and duty staff to explicitly reteach the behavioral expectations, and then in addition, we revamped the supervision schedule, and we increased active supervision with more adults, and as a result, the number of behavioral incidents, not surprisingly, but happily, decreased. As far as our next steps, we're going to share the results of this survey with a full staff and ask for feedback and ideas. The school leadership team and the PBIS teams will work to address areas of improvement identified in each of those surveys and use that information when creating our school goals for next year. Positive classroom behavior is going to be reinforced by effective positive acknowledgement systems regularly implemented in the classroom and then adjusted as needed. Students who need additional assistance with behavior or academics will be supported by our advanced tier team, which is part of our multi-tiered system of supports. We do plan, shameless plug here, we do plan a student PBIS team for next year to create ideas to work in tandem with our school expectations and encourage that peer respect and appropriate classroom behavior. We will increase, happily, opportunities with parents and guardians to better connect with our school. We're going to continue to work on improved communication. That is always a goal. Anywhere I've ever been, you cannot over-communicate. So that will be continue to be front and center for us. We will happily have post-pandemic opportunities for human interactions at school, including reinstituting volunteer opportunities. And another shameless plug, Green Central School is proud to announce the formation or the reformation of the Green Gator Parent-Teacher Committee. So that is now an active and a very excited group of parents. So any Green parents that are interested in that, please, please call the school for more information, and we can connect you with PTC. And then, of course, as Dr. Gillis mentioned, we are going to administer this survey again at the beginning and the conclusion of next year to help with our planning and to see what progress we've made. So, are there any questions? Thank you for your time.
Good evening. I'm Danielle Harris, principal at Leeds Central School. We had, in discussing this with the leadership team, they wanted me to point out and remind you that only grades 3 through 6 on those pre-K to 6 schools were surveyed. Apparently PBIS feels like students below grade 3 aren't reliable reporters on surveys. But it was a kindergarten teacher who pointed out that it's only half of our school that was surveyed, so they just wanted me to make sure that I reminded you of that. So we did have 83 respondents to our student survey, which is pretty close to the number of students we have in grades 3 through 6, and their average score was an exact 3.0. And I also did want to remind you, like one of our principals did say, that the students were responding to their statements that they're giving with a scale of never would be a 1, sometimes would be a 2, often would be a 3, and always would be a 4. So if there's a score that's in the 2 range, it's an average around sometimes to often. And if there's a score in the 3 range, it's an average around often to always. So that's where we get these 3s and 2s from. So the highest that our students in our school rated for question was, my school wants me to do well, a 3.62. Very proud of the fact that the second highest was, there's an adult at school who will help me if I need it. We do have a lot of connections with our students and adults. Number 3 and 4 were, my school has clear rules for behavior and teachers treat me with respect. And number 5, just right 1/100th below the treating with respect, is I feel safe at school at 3.27. So that addresses the question about how students feel at school. In that, under the student survey, the 2 areas that were the lowest was I like school, which I have to think back to those words. How many students would say always? And some kids say sometimes, sometimes say often. So it's between sometime and often. Obviously, we want to increase that to be higher, but that's what they're answering. Students in my class behave so that teachers can teach was the second one in the areas where we want to look a little harder. Then we had 27 families respond to our survey, and the average score of those was 3.08. My student feels safe going to and from school, and I attend parent-teacher conferences at my student school where the two highest tied at 3.59. As we had already been discussing in our leadership team, the connection between parents and the school has felt not where it was in the past before COVID, and definitely something we want to focus on as we move forward. And this survey just supports the importance of that. So in our lower scores that we want to focus on, I frequently volunteer to help on special projects at my student school was 2.41, because there hasn't been much that parents could do with our school in the last year and a half or 2 years. And then all students are treated fairly at my student school, 2.59, and I'm actively involved at my student school, 2.74. So we are going to look to increase the connection with our parents over the next year, hopefully. We can have them into our building. The staff, there was 24 respondents with an average score of 3.3, and very high. I feel safe when entering and leaving my school building, 3.92, which is pretty close to always, so that's a good thing. Teachers at my school treat students fairly regardless of race, ethnicity, or culture, 3.88. I feel safe at my school, 3.83. And I get along well with other staff members at my school, 3.75. That's 3/4 of the way towards an always from the sometimes, or often. So that was actually a little bit surprising and very heartwarming for me to know that our staff feel that way. And then we had the very first time, we've discussed it twice in our leadership team. The first time, the one we focused on our discussion around, was that students at my school demonstrate behaviors that allow teachers to teach and students to learn, is the root of what we need to work on, 2.58. It's an area we've discussed quite a bit in the last month or so. So some of the next steps are that we're going to work with this through the PBIS team and the leadership team, and then when we come back in August when we have our workshop days, we'll be sharing the results with the full staff. Those two teams are going to take a look at it in different ways. PBIS is more looking at the social and emotional, and leadership team looks a lot more at the structure of how our school day goes. So we are really hoping that we can start having assemblies, lots more rewards. We're going to talk about word of the month, which I know some of the other schools do, and lots more recognition of appropriate behaviors. We are hoping that we can start having our frequent family events and inviting parents to participate in them with their children. That was something that was a huge strength of Leeds Central School before COVID, and something that's been greatly missed. We want to increase our partnerships with parents and guardians in order to support student growth. And one of the big ways I'm excited to do, hopefully, in the fall, is to invite lots of volunteers into the building to work with children, possibly to supervise recess or lunch, to play games with children, to be a mentor. Whatever somebody can give, we'd love to have that. And one of my dreams in the whole 12 years I've been there is to connect more with Levitt High School to recruit high school students to work with our students. Where they get out of school an hour earlier, we'd love to have them come for a little bit at the end of the day, maybe mentor a child who needs some attention or listen to a child read. Another thing that we're going to change in our structure is that instead of once a week for 40 minutes having a guidance lesson, which is sometimes hard to maintain the focus and attention of some of our little children, we're going to look at how we can do it twice a week for 20 minutes so that they get 2 much more focused lessons in the same amount of time. And we're going to see how that will work. We're also going to have the teachers become more familiar with the guidance curriculum so it can be used throughout the week so that everyone in the building can be on the same page. We're going to share the lesson materials for each lesson with classroom teachers. We're going to try to start using the same language from pre-K to 6 and having it when they learn a lesson in guidance that it's carried over throughout the week in their classroom. And of course, we'll administer the survey like everyone else. I there any questions?
Thank you.
Good evening, Janet Mates, principal at the middle school. So we had 226 responses at the middle school for students. Unfortunately, I can't do a mean average like the elementaries because on the secondary survey, the extended survey, some of the questions, the scale is skewed and you want never to be the answer, which is a 1. For example, I've worried about other students at school hurting me. You would want a 1, a never. And so for that subgroup, for student safety, the average overall for all of 5 questions was a 1.9. So again, 1 being never and 2 being sometimes. Some areas to celebrate. I know an adult at school that I can talk to if I need help. We scored a 3.2. The national average is a 3.02, so although it still leaves some students identifying as not having an adult that they feel comfortable going to, we are higher than the national average. As well as my school has clear rules for behavior. We scored a 3.3, the national average is a 3.1. So I'm confident that we're ahead of the national average in the important steps for physical and emotional safety. Our highest score, students self-identify as treating each other fairly, which is classic middle school. They're all doing what they're supposed to, it's just the other students, right? Areas to reflect, I like school was a 2.5. The national average is 2.7, and most days I look forward to going to school, 2.3, and there was not a norm for that one. And so areas around safety, we're feeling pretty good, but student attitudes, or middle school student attitudes about going to school, we're not where they want them to be. Some next steps, I really want to dig deeper into the question regarding the trusted adult. So 3.2 is good, but as I said before, it still leaves a percentage that did not identify a trusted adult. We've implemented the crew and advisory model, and my hope would be that every single student would recognize their crew leader or advisor as a trusted adult. It's an anonymous survey, so it's hard to tell. But I'd be interested to talk with staff and students about their comfort level of identifying who their trusted adult would be. I think it would be interesting to see which students don't have a trusted adult and why not. And then also which staff are recognized by a lot of students and what they're doing to be considered a trusted adult. Also want to look into incorporating some common sense media lessons into some of our crew and computer classes, similar to what others said, the online bullying and misuse of technology is a huge concern that carries over into the building during the day, even if it's not done during school hours. And lastly, just really dig deeper into these with the staff to set some goals around culture for next year. Does anybody have any questions on ours?
Thank you.
Good evening. Excuse me. We had also conducted the survey. Our window for student surveys just closed last Friday. We had 356 student responses. As Janet pointed out, we have the extended version of the survey. There are 36 questions. There are 8 topics that range from school connectedness and school safety to order and discipline, so everything in between. There are a number of positive things specifically from the student survey that came out of it. One of them, similar to Jana's, I know an adult at school that I can talk with if I need help. Our average score was 3.07 and as near as we can find for a national kind of norm on that particular question, 0.02, so we're just a little bit above. I would like to see it higher, but it's trending in the right direction. I can't say trending because it's the only number I have, so it's the number I have. And then another one that I would like to see higher, but was higher than the average that we could find, was students are frequently recognized for good behavior. Our average was 2.56, and the national one that we could find was 2.5. we have built up our recognition for students with star recognition and student of the quarter, and we are going to look at ways that we can address that further. And I would reiterate something that Teresa said when she was up here. It's a little weird to be talking in too much detail about the data. I haven't had an opportunity to share it with staff yet because I just got the finalized data last Friday. So next Thursday I have a meeting with the network leaders, and I'll share it with them and then share it out with the staff from there, and we'll be able to digest it a little bit further. But it's some areas for improvement. Again, this is somewhat of a loaded question, but it's 3 words. I like school, and our average was 2.51. The national norm that we could find was 2.7 with that particular question, but I want to see that one higher. So that's going to be something that we're going to work on. And then one that I found interesting, and I'll come back to it in a second, I couldn't find a national norm on this particular one, but students at my school treat each other with respect. Our average score is 2.21. The reason I find that interesting is because prior to the survey being administered, we have been talking about it as a staff and ways in which we could do some things around the building. And one of the things we talked about doing was focusing on the student code of conduct, the district student code of conduct, and the area that we chose to focus on was respect. And one of the things we did or have done is we identified a group of 11th and 12th grade volunteers. They get together, or I get together with them here in the auditorium, and they worked with each other to develop a list of questions that they then went to 9th and 10th grade HPTs and had conversations around respect and what it looks like in various places, whether in school or out of school. And all accounts, those were great discussions with a lot of positive feedback from students and staff on that. And as we got that feedback from those conversations, we're starting to talk about how we expand those conversations for next year. And one of the things that we're going to put into place is on our 9th grade orientation day, we have all the 9th graders and their HPTs, and we have 2 or 3 upper class students that work with them throughout the day. And what we're going to do is have them continue to work with those 9th grade HPTs throughout the year. So periodically throughout the year, they'll go and facilitate conversations with their groups, and we'll be able to develop those relationships even better. As I said, there are some other next steps, and one of those is sharing this information with the network leaders and the staff, and that starts next Thursday as I have that conversation with the network leaders. And then we'll take that information, develop some ideas, and the school leadership team will identify areas for improvement and identify areas that we're seeing positive results, so ways we can expand some things and some things that we need to work on. We will develop action steps on those areas that need improvement and steps that we can take to expand things that are going well, and then incorporate those steps into next year's school goals. So next fall, when I stand up here and I talk about these are the school goals we developed, I'll be able to reference the information from the survey. Any questions for me? Questions?
Thank you. Thanks to all the building principals for following up on some of those survey data, and also for laying out what the next steps are. And I'm certain that folks will be interested to hear and participate in those ongoing conversations and that ongoing work. That brings us to the superintendent's report. Kim.
Thank you, Betsy. I'd also like to thank our principals because they are beginning to go to that very busy end of the school season when we have field days and celebrations of learning and proms and graduations and all kinds of things. So thank you all very much for all the hard work that you're doing already. So you heard us talk at the last board meeting about the need to test for lead in the water. It's a requirement. And Food Service Director Dave Roberts is also our water specialist in the district, and he is leading the work related to the lead testing. Dave was recently contacted by the state, and the state has told him that they are delaying the timelines related to the requirements for the lead testing in water, simply because their labs are overwhelmed and they don't have capacity to keep up with all of the current lead testing. So they told Dave, and I'm sure they're telling others as well, to submit the water samples sometime after September 1st and before December 31st. So Dave was gearing up, he has all the supplies to do that testing now. He now is going to wait and do that in the fall of next year. And we'll keep you apprised of that. Adult education graduation is coming up on Friday, May 27th at 6 p.m. right here in the auditorium at the high school. Brian, I'm looking at you, but you're not looking back. Yes. Okay. We're really excited and looking forward to that graduation because adult ed graduation is always a wonderful event. It is well attended and has great food to it and lots of beautiful flowers and a lot of happy students and staff. This year we have a special speaker, as we do always for adult graduation, and it will be our former adult education director, Rizal Ward, who will do the speaking. So looking forward to that, Brian. We are working very hard to fill open positions. We have recently hired a new facilities and transportation director, David Coburn, who will begin on June 7th. Last evening, the search committee interviewed candidates for the TAS principal position, and I am in the process now of checking references with hopes of bringing a nomination for that position to the board on June 2nd. Interviews for the next Turner Primary School principal will be held in early June, and we are still advertising for a business manager, and we have not had too many, like none. Excuse me, I've got to check this because it could be the, right now we have, our BBR is just closed. Excuse me.
So hold that thought.
Hello. Hi Becky, how are you? I'm good, thank you. I'm ready to take numbers, yeah. Okay. Okay, so could you say that one more time for me? Uh-huh. Okay, Becky, thank you so much for letting me know. I have not yet. Thank you. All right, bye-bye. I'm back again. All right, so as I was saying, looking for a business manager as well. We're also advertising for a technology director. Principals are busy with some teaching positions, and I've had the ability to have second interviews with some candidates recently, and one of those is on for this evening. I'm looking forward. We're making some very good hires. So every board meeting, I report on the data related to COVID. I'm hoping that that might be over after the end of this year. We shall see. Let's get started. Androscoggin County has been low for a long time now. Androscoggin County, that's us, we are now in medium category. Our vaccination rates have stayed the same for a long period of time now. The exception would be that in Leeds, that's moved up from 62 to 63% of people vaccinated, and in Turner, it has moved up from 66 to 67% of people vaccinated. Number of positive cases at Leeds Central School, I'm sorry, let me start over. At Green Central School, a total of 6. At Leeds Central School, 4. At Turner Primary School, 4. Turner Elementary School, 0. Tripp Middle School, 5. Leavitt Area High School, 24. And that's a change, that number. There is no more pool testing. If you remember, the state was ending the pool testing as of May 13th, so we do not have that going on anymore. I do want to thank our nurses again. That was a tremendous amount of work that they did beautifully for so long. Total hospitalized, 228. In critical care, 31, and on ventilators, 2. And wastewater sampling data is available. It's on the website. That has jumped up a lot. So we know that means prevalence in the community. I was in a meeting last week with superintendents as well as with representation from Maine School Management Association and representation from the Department of Education. And what we discussed and learned was that the Maine CDC and the Department of Education are not planning to change the standard operating procedures this year, meaning that optional masking will remain in place for the remainder of this year. The standard operating procedures will be retired at the end of this year as well, and COVID-19 will be treated like any other communicable applicable disease, which means that if any school has 15% or more of any combination of its students and or staff out due to that illness, the school nurse will call the CDC, and the CDC may open an investigation and may make some recommendations. But at this point, the status quo for the rest of this year. The budget validation referendum happened today at local polling places between 1 and 7, and I'd like to thank Becky and Turner, who actually just called me, Joyce in Leeds, and Carol and Green for their help with this, and for calling me to let me know, whoops, I've got to go. Thank you. Hello?
Here I have the microphone
It
again.
is. Hello, I'm well, Carol. How are you? Good. Okay, and could you please say those numbers for me again, just make sure I have them? Okay. Okay, great, Carol, thank you so much. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Okay, and that was all that I have.
And that was it. Thank you, Kim. That brings us to public comment. And as usual, I will review the policy for public comment. During the time allotted for public participation, members of the public may speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the school, except for personal matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students, which shall be addressed through established policies and procedures. The following guidelines shall apply to public participation at board meetings. Citizens and employees of the school unit are welcome to participate as provided in this policy. Others may be recognized to speak at the chair's discretion. Individual employees or employee groups will not be permitted to discuss matters for which complaint or grievance procedures are provided. The chair may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic, as well as the time each individual may speak, and that's at 3 minutes currently. In the event of a sizable audience, which we do not have this evening, the chair may require persons interested in speaking to sign up so that they may be called on in a fair and efficient manner. During the time set aside for public participation, the chair will be responsible for recognizing all speakers who must identify themselves as they begin talking. Speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. All speakers are to address the chair and direct questions or comments to particular board members or the superintendent only with approval of the chair. Requests for information or concerns that require further research may be referred to the superintendent to be addressed at a later time. Members of the board and the superintendent may ask questions of any person who addresses the board, but are expected to refrain from arguing or debating issues. Questions must be addressed through the chair. No complaints or allegations will be allowed at board meetings concerning any person employed by the school system or against particular students. Personal matters or complaints concerning student or staff issues will not be considered in a public meeting, but will be referred through established policies and procedures. In order to make efficient use of meeting time, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments to the board. The board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. The chair has the authority to stop any presentation that violates these guidelines or the privacy rights of others. Persons who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave, and the chair may request law enforcement assistance as necessary to restore order. All right, who's our first participant?
Crystal Nicholas from Green. During our last meeting, following proper procedure to the best of my knowledge, I submitted to the school board and superintendent a policy proposing that the board shall take no action that directly injures children. Indeed, it would bar any activity that had already been shown to bring harm to individuals. I was told that my proposal would not be placed upon the agenda for today, May 19th, 2022. I inquired if it may be placed on a future agenda, and though I requested a response, I was never honored with a reply. Would that I had a school sport to discuss, I may well have been granted an audience. We could then learn about all of the laws that all of a sudden just needed to be followed. What is transpiring here is obvious. No one wants to talk about the masked elephant in the room. Yet what possible harm could it do to put it in writing that the board policy henceforth shall not directly harm children? Without that protection, our children are vulnerable to the whims of the ruling class and their interpretation by our board. Mask mandates are rearing their covered faces again in Maine. We, and most importantly our children, are just pawns in a game. Hereby, I now have public record that I have fully exhausted every resolution of my son's injury at my disposal as of this date, May 19th, 2022, from the inception of my complaint of August 19th, 2021. Failure to respond to me within 30 days, that is, to bring my proposal to the floor for a scheduled discussion, will be construed as agreement that no resolution will be sought by the school board or superintendent on this issue. Thank you.
Still filling these sheets up? I think you know us by name, right? I'm not going to take up a ton of time tonight. I just want to let you know what I've done is I have sent a letter requesting to see where our curriculum, whether you want to call it CRT or social emotional learning, is in our curriculum, and wondering why that is something that we're teaching in the school. And it is not in the school's curriculum, so I was deferred to the Department of Education. So if it's not in our curriculum, I'm wondering why we're teaching it. And the Department of Education is pulling websites down, or videos down currently, because of some of the things that are being said through social emotional learning, et cetera, et cetera. So I will look into it deeper, but I think that all of us should be looking into it deeper and finding out why we're teaching our kids something that's not part of our curriculum. That's all.
Hi, Jimmy Childs from Leeds. I am the board chair, and I am changing my time from 3 minutes to 5. Is this position fluid, Mr. Fuller? Okay, neither is gender. But anyways, I want to thank you all for what you do, the administrative stuff. I don't mean to be a hard butt, but you know, there's just a lot of stuff going on in this world. You know, all the stuff with the parental rights in different states, the gender stuff, the transgender stuff. I mean, none of that stuff was being implemented in these schools until the COVID-19 came out. And in the ESSER grant, basically, this stuff here, what I'm going to give to you guys after, is like a pretext to that. And it has more about gender inclusion and all that stuff than it does about safety mitigations in our school, which is very concerning to me. I FOIA requested some stuff. I asked Ms. Brandt if the school does evidence-based interventions. She agreed that the school does. So, and the science behind it, like no matter what I did to myself or my child, I could never change their biology. It would be XY chromosome, XX for a daughter. I could never change it. So no matter what I say or do, it would be fictitious. I mean, and I believe that adults can do what they want to do. I just think that it has no room in our school system, is all I want. You know, for these kids to get to a certain school, whether it's middle school, high school, and they say, oh, well, my friend Tammy is now Tommy, and hey, Dad, I want to try that. That's going on, it's happening. You know, is that my, you know, this is a place of public accommodations where, you know, our religion, our faith, our beliefs, we don't believe, that's not true. You know, if it's evidence-based decision-making, then you can't force somebody else to call a girl a boy or him or her, or you can't try to change it in their pronouns or vocabulary. Now, I don't think that any of you guys personally are trying to do that, but there's government entities out there, and I have it all in this, that is trying to change that stuff. You know, so it's just, as a stakeholder, as a parent, I just would appreciate that you guys look into it if you haven't already seen some stuff and get back to me. I go to all of you guys together, think maybe as a collective. I mean, I understand my representative. I haven't really talked to them a lot personally. I just figured maybe as a group, maybe I got to reach out to them personally. But I just would like this stuff looked at and maybe something done to figure out so we don't have it in our school. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment this evening? If not, thank you. We will move on to old business. We don't have any actual old business this evening, so that brings us to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Hillary, do we have a second? That was Crystal
Okay,
for a
Joyce, could you
second.
read those numbers to me one more time, just to make sure I have them correct? Okay?
All those in favor?
Excellent. Joyce, thank you so much for calling me. Okay, talk to you soon.
Those
Bye.
opposed?
Thanks, bye.
Unanimous? That brings us to new business. New business 9.1, instructional nominations. We'll act on those collectively after the nominations have been read by the superintendent. Kim?
So Principal Mates writes that she's had the pleasure of being Carla, this is Carla Good, ELA teacher at the middle school. Carla is an immediate supervisor for 4 years in Lewiston, at Lewiston Middle School. Carla is an amazing educator, and she's very excited to have an opportunity to work with her again. She will be a great fit for the Tripp family and the MSAD 52 community. And Jana, I agree with you. I had the opportunity to interview Carla after your team did, and I was very excited to hear her depth of knowledge and her caring for students. I think she will be a great fit.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Yuri, do we have a second? Crystal?
Sure.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous? Thank you. That brings us to item 9.2, and item 9.2 is approval of donation of 10 cubic feet of castine raised bed mix for the Green Central School garden. We have a motion for that. Crystal, do we have a second? Second from Jamie. Discussion on this one. See none? All those in favor? Unanimous? That brings us to item 9.3, approval of donation of $300 from Heidi Vero on behalf of Bill and Marion Vero to be used toward the purchase of Books A Million gift cards to be awarded to students in recognition of overall school performance/improvement. Do we have a motion for that one?
So moved.
Crystal, do we have a second? Yuri? Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9.4, to authorize the superintendent of school to offer contracts and hire during the summer. So we have a motion for that one.
So moved.
Yuri, do we have a second? Crystal, Kathy? Dee, all the above. Discussion on this one. All those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9.5, to act on the recommendation of the superintendent for administrator contract extensions. Kathy, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Crystal? Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.6, approval of the 2022-23 board calendar. Do we have a motion for that one?
So moved.
Crystal, do we have a second? Kathy? Thank you. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9.7, approval of February, March, and April operating and expenditure reports.
So moved.
Yuri, do we have a second? Kathy? Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.8, approval of overnight field trip for Leavitt Area High School's Latin Club to attend the Maine Junior Classical League Spring Convention in Winthrop.
So moved.
Kathy, do we have a second? Jessica, Jamie, both seconded. Discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.9, discussion of Leavitt Area High School seniors and Chromebooks. Who wants to take this one? Mr. Shaw.
No, it was your idea.
Before I do, I want to just take this opportunity and thank Tristan, as Betsy did, as this is his last board meeting. He's done an outstanding job this year representing the student body, and I appreciated the opportunity to work with him on that. He and I will not be here next week, or the next board meeting, because we'll be at the senior banquet, which is a couple days before graduation, which is crazy to mention right now that that's only a couple weeks away, but it is. So, seniors and Chromebooks. So for the last several years, we have purchased sets of Chromebooks for incoming ninth graders as they come into the high school, so they get a new Chromebook to start. At the end, we've collected them and have distributed them to lower grades if they were any good to use. At this point in time, all the lower grades have computers, and we have these Chromebooks that the seniors have, and to be quite honest, in the words of the tech guys, they're obsolete and they're not good for anything. We're not going to use them, and we can't resell them. So my question is, what I would like to do with them is, I would like to have the seniors keep them, and they can use them for whatever they do next, whether that is go off to school or career or whatever it is, use them until they don't work anymore. Because for us, we have last year's set that we collected, and it's still sitting in the back room, just sitting in the back room. So that's exactly what this set will do if we collect them. So that is my request to the board this evening.
From a process standpoint, would you like a motion of some sort in support of that, just for clarity purposes?
I think we probably need one to dispense of property.
Do we have anybody interested in making that sort of motion?
I would move that seniors get to retain their Chromebooks with it.
Do we have a second? Kathy? Discussion?
Why
Jessica?
we can't resell them?
I don't have I asked the question, I got an answer of no, I did not get a further explanation.
I was just curious. Yeah.
Sorry, I can't.
Yuri?
So at some point when the need may arise again for the lower grades to get them, that'd be something we'd revisit at that time.
I would think so. I would envision myself asking this question on an annual basis, if it was something that we could do.
Additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for creative solution to that. Brings us to item 9.10, and that is second reading and adoption of revised policy EEAEF, video cameras on transportation vehicles and regulations EEAEF-R.
So moved.
Second.
Yuri and Kathy, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. 9.11, second reading and adoption of revised policy JJE, fundraising activities and regulations JJER.
So moved.
Kathy, and do we have a second?
I'll second.
Crystal, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.12, second reading and adoption of revised policy JK, student discipline.
So moved.
Yuri,
Second.
Kathy for the second. Discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.13 is a request for an executive session, as is 9.15 and 9.17, and these are each to The first is to discuss duties of officials, appointees, employees, and the second two are each to discuss compensation of officials, appointees, or employees. Do we have any other items of business that need to be taken up while we are still here with an audience? If not, we would entertain a motion for 9.13.
So, second.
Crystal and Kathy. All those in favor? Unanimous. Are in executive